Good evening and welcome to David Divine Broadcasting. Good evening, everybody. Tonight I'm joined from True Crime, easy for me to say, True Crime Garage, at True Crime, yeah, True Crime Garage on YouTube and truecrimegarage.com. Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, David, for having me on. I'm excited to be here and excited to have some fun conversations with you for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna get interesting. We've already had a great talk backstage, so we'll see what happens tonight. See how off topic we can get. What's up, Mike
Right.
Jones? Matthew Scanian. What's up, Hope? Cashew, good to see you. Francisca. It's fun to say from the Elf movie. Francisca. It's fun to say. Mikey's Beach. Hello. Paradox Fossils. Hello. Bigfoot Lake. Hello. And we'll say hi to people as they come in. I do have a viewer question already for Nick, and so feel free to ask your questions in the chat. Before we get started with the first question, we do have several people to thank for sharing tonight's show with their communities, and that is Mike at Bigfoot Sasquatch, at Montauk is Strange, the Nut House, and this is a great one, at Creamy Nut Butter. So that's a nice name. Yeah. I like it. At Mikey's Beach, my favorite place to hang out on Thursdays and Sundays, I think. And at Mr. Rob G. Check out those channels. And all the links, as well as Nick's links, are in the description below. And we'll probably thank him at the end. Again. All right, Nick, I was tempted just to read. Yeah, calm down, Mike Jones says. I was tempted to read the description on your YouTube channel because it's excellent. It makes me want to sit down, drink some good beer, and listen to True Crime.
Do you have it in front of you? Could you read it? Because I've forgotten what the description is.
Oh yeah, I'll find. Let me dial it up real quick. Let me go over to your. Well, I'm listening to the show now. Real quick might not be a thing, Nick, but. But I'll work on we'll work on it here. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see.
Well, while you're working on that, I do want to say it's good to talk to a fellow Ohio resident, and so that I was intrigued and excited to talk to you, David. Just that we share not so much a backyard, but a larger community, if you will. And it is 10 p.m. So I've already had about 3 beers because I was watching the football game. And
oh yeah,
we did record a True Crime Garage episode, and I had about a beer and a half during that one. So if you don't mind, I will. I'm gonna partake.
No, go ahead. Yeah, please do. Please do. I'll stare at you with envy. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I'm getting close, Nick. I'm on the case.
I get to sleep in a little bit tomorrow, so I think a few drinks while I have fun with you here, David, would be a good time.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. What are you drinking tonight?
For the occasion, I actually pulled this baby out of the there it is, the old bar in the basement there. That's Old Port Rye, something I picked up. I just went to Maine recently. Never been to Maine before. And this is Old Port Straight Rye Whiskey, Liquid Riot from the people making good stuff there in Portland, Maine. Cool city. I recommend it to all of your viewers if they've never been there. A little expensive. I was a little surprised. I thought Maine, kind of a blue collar, we chop wood, carry water kind of state. But Portland, a little more fancy schmancy, really good food, lots of great places to walk to. Your car is actually not necessarily, unless you want to pay a lot for parking, but the great city. And they got a lot of cool little islands off of the coast there that you can, for pretty cheap, hop on a ferry for a few bucks and go over to the island and walk around, and they got cool restaurants. And then if you're into lobster, you can eat as much lobster as you want while you're there.
Yeah, it's somewhere. It's not a destination that people recommend often, but you're really selling it. And, and I
Well,
would,
yeah, we did a road trip, and it's been a while since I've done a road trip, and it was long overdue, and that was one of the stops for us.
right. And so that's where you found this whiskey. And what was the name of that whiskey again?
Liquid Riot. It's a straight rye from the good people over at uh, Old Port Straight Rye, and I believe the company name would be Liquid Riot. Yeah.
Liquid Rye. All right, we'll
Yeah.
check it out. What's up, Mike? What's up, Cam? Good to see you. How's the studio coming, Cam? All right, here's the description of True Crime Garage, which is a awesome description. Host, are you ready, Nick? You ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. Host Nick and Captain, shout out to Captain, who we'll talk about tonight, invite you to grab a chair, grab a beer, and join them as they talk some true crime. This is no ordinary garage. It's a rabbit hole of true crime with generous supply of alcohol and banter to lighten the load. From international atrocities to heinous stories on U.S. home turf. Dive headfirst into a different case each week and enjoy a cold one whilst you're there. Very inviting. I like it. If you consider yourself an armchair detective, you're in the right place and you're amongst friends. For the mystery seeker, True Crime Garage presents an archive of missing person, unsolved, and cold cases, plus accounts of infamous serial killers and chilling solved cases. True Crime Garage has just one rule. This is a good rule, and I noticed it on the merch too. Don't litter. Don't litter, guys. And remember to not take yourself too seriously, because if you do, nobody else will. So there you go. That's a fantastic description.
Thank you. I think we paid someone to write a portion of that.
Is that the key? That's the key.
You know what? I think what we did was, if I remember correctly, because we've been doing True Crime Garage podcasts for 8 years now. Okay. So, and with my beer intake, it gets a little confusing and a little fuzzy. What a long, strange trip it's been, right?
Right.
So I wrote up a great description that I thought was great. And I think the captain at one point told me, you know what, I think we could jazz this up a little bit. I will take credit for the don't take yourself too seriously part. That was one that I said, nope, we can't change that part at all. So, and David, if I sound weird or you need me to do anything on my end, I can always make any adjustments if I'm too loud.
Oh no, you sound great. I just have my my monitors got the circle of death. It's just a circle of death. So I'm trusting everything's sounding good out there. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you guys started in November of 2015.
That's correct.
With some cases and decided to make a podcast. That's how it started. You guys are just drinking and having a good time.
Well, yeah, the drinking was by accident, because when we first started doing the podcast, it was just an excuse to hang out. Like here's a little fun project we could work on and have a couple beers after work while we work on it. Right. And we also thought nobody would ever listen to the show. So we might as well have a couple beers, because we both were at our jobs all day long. And then unbeknownst to us, like 6 months later, we're like, oh crap, in a good way, but people are listening to the show. Now we really gotta step up our game a little bit, because there's an actual audience.
So it took you 6 months in, you had where were you broadcasting? On YouTube, Spotify, or did you just start with one?
We were just releasing podcast episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like the bigger podcast platforms. I don't think we had anything on YouTube for until a few months after that. Like I said, it was just supposed to be a fun project for the two of us to work on together, excuse to get together, after work once a week. And we put it out there on the airwaves just because we could, and people started listening. So we were very lucky that people wanted to tune into two guys sitting in a garage.
No, it's a great. I mean, it's a great concept. You know what, Rob? What's going on, Rob? Latin. Good to see you, Rob G. The social dig. No, it's a great concept. I love it. What was the first? What was the first case that you talked about on your podcast?
We did the a case that's got a handful of different names to it. Some people call it the Moonlight Murders. Some call it the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. The Phantom Killer case, and that was about it's an old cold case from Texarkana, and really the crimes took place in a very short period of time. A handful of murders. They were all gun related, very similar to kind of the Son of Sam or early Zodiac killings, where people in vehicles are being attacked by this unknown assailant. And I don't, not really certain why we chose that as our first one. No real plan. Again, no real plan for the show. Just that was the first episode, and from there we just started picking a different case every week.
Were you guys did you guys talk about it often together, or it was just something that y'all, or you listen to other true crime podcasts or something, or how do you come up with that?
Well, a few different things here. So my partner, the captain, was a big coast to coast guy. Okay. And the reason being that he's a big coast to coast guy, not only is it a fantastic show, but it typically runs at night, and he's played in bands forever, and he's a great musician, great bass player, especially a great bass player, but guitar, drums, everything. And so at the time, back in the day, before we started the podcast, he was living in Indiana, and I, of course, here in Ohio.
Right.
And he would listen to Coast because he would play a lot of shows in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and then have to drive all the way home to Indiana and listen to Coast at night on the way home to keep him awake.
Yeah.
And they're always talking about something interesting on there.
Yeah, that's how I really got into, well, in my adult life, how coast to coast is how I got into talk radio too, because same thing, playing in bands. Someone says, "Have you listened to Art Bell?" And you turn it on, and then you're hooked, right? That's it.
And I've listened to the show a little bit, but because of the hours, not as much. But I did always have a great love of talk radio. I'm not going to pretend to be a musician, but he and I did play in a handful of bands together in our high school and college years. So I do have a background in that. And that's kind of, we worked on those projects together for a long time. And, when he's in Indiana and I'm in Ohio, he knew I was way into true crime ever since at an uncomfortably young age. Like I even remember some of the books I would bring home. My parents had a bit of an issue with. Never told me to throw them out or anything like that, but they had a bit of an issue. They're like, why do you want to read this stuff?
Yeah. Why are you?
I'm like, you're always telling me to read. This is really the only thing I'm interested in reading. So can we just let it go? But so we would talk on the phone regularly to keep the friendship alive, right? And check in once in a while. But he would, especially, like, if they were talking about a true crime story on Coast to Coast, which they do on occasion.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He'd call me up and he'd be like, "Hey, have you heard of this BTK guy? Hey, have you heard of this Ed Edwards guy? I heard this show the other night that was fantastic." And usually I'd have a decent general knowledge of the stuff because of reading it since I was a kid. And a life goal of mine was always to write a true crime book. And I just put out my first true crime book earlier this year. It's called The Delphi Murders, The Quest to Find the Man on the Bridge. But at the time, back in 2014 and 2015, I was working on a book that I was going to call Unsolved in Ohio. And it was going to be a different chapter on a different Ohio cold case. And I had about 15 to 20 picked out. And I was actually actively driving out to where these crimes took place, attempting to call and connect with detectives that may have intimate knowledge of the case, and even actually trying to reach out to some of the family members. And so he and I came up with this idea. He was moving back to Columbus, Ohio, and he said, and we were both kind of listening to podcasts at the time. Now, back in the day, as you know, David, you had to download podcasts on your computer and
Right.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
so you could listen to them. And back then, believe it or not, this is really hard to believe because it feels like there's a few thousand true crime podcasts these days, but back then there was not that many. And there were some that I thought were doing it good and some that weren't doing it so good. And he agreed. And I told him, he goes, "Hey, you want to work on this podcast idea? This is something I think we could do." He has a background in recording engineering and he went to school for that. And like I said, he's a legit musician.
Yeah.
And so he said, we need a topic, a genre. And I think he may have suggested sports, which actually wouldn't have been that bad of an idea because I think right now sports podcasts are really booming.
Oh, yeah.
But we were both big sports fans, but I told him, I'm like, "Hey man, I've been working on this book and to be honest with you, I don't think it was that good at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I'd put together all these chapters and put all this work in on it. And I'm like, hey, I read a lot of true crime and that's an idea." And he's like, "You know what? I think that's a pretty darn good idea." And because when he would call me about if they featured a case on Coast to Coast, or if something caught his eye on YouTube back then, he'd call me and we would find ourselves in an hour-long conversation about some case pretty randomly. And so it was a fun, interesting conversation between two people. And we thought, you know what, it's an excuse to hang out. And like I said, we didn't think we would ever release it. We didn't think if we did, anybody would listen, and people did. And we're very thankful that people want to hear us talk.
Right. No, it's a great show. There's a question. Oh, someone's Hope's making a comment about Nightbot. I don't have subscriber only mode on, and now I remember why. Nightbot pops up there. So if Nightbot is bothering you, I'm sorry. What's up, Bushcraft? I wanted to say hi to Indy and also Margaret. Thank you for the comment that said it's a good show tonight, and it sure is. Nick's an interesting guy. And then Hope had this question. You're in Ohio. I'm real curious if you know about a double homicide that is unsolved from the 90s in Mansfield.
Do we have the victims' names?
Yeah, that would be. Google that for us, Hope, and then we'll come back to that.
And so one thing I noticed, David, did you guys do a episode on the Mansfield Reformatory?
Oh yeah. We Hope is kind of a Mansfield reformatory expert. So she had taken another streamer down there and they did a show, and then Eddie Block was in town, and so he's another streamer, and so Hope invited me and we went down and streamed. Now he did a live stream. I just recorded footage just because I had never been there, and I really just wanted to pay attention kind of to the place, and sometimes if you're live streaming, you're more worried about your chat. But we went down there. Yeah, it was awesome. Incredible. So, of course, have you been there?
Yes. And actually the thing about that is I've had very few weird encounters in my lifetime, but I did have one when I was there. I saw that your show does dogmen and Bigfoot. I've never ever experienced either of those though, but the dogmen and Bigfoot really intrigued me. But I did have what could be. I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm pretty convinced that I saw something that wasn't there. If that makes any sense. Yeah,
and it's so open. That's why I enjoy hearing everybody's story, because that's their experience. And It's interesting, and I'm just getting into talking about it. I mean, I've like again, coast to coast, Art Bell. I've listened to these subjects for years, but meeting all these interesting people is fun. Hope says the last name of those people was Wright. Right.
Unfortunately, it's not ringing any bells. Now, I will say, when she mentioned Mansfield, and I know this is completely off of topic from her question, but
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
the
go
the
for it.
thing that popped in my mind is there's an old, still unsolved series of murders called the Alphabet Murders from New York, and Hope may not know this, who somebody from Mansfield, but one of the top suspects in that case eventually made his way to Mansfield and I believe lived out his years in Mansfield. He was investigated at one point for involvement. It was three murders that took place back in the 70s, I believe. And there were a handful of suspects because when you have a series of murders, three different homicides, uh, there were one or two suspects in each one of them, but he was considered a really good suspect. I don't know if he did it, but I do know that he ended up, and his name escapes me at the moment, but he did move back to Mansfield because I think he may have been there from there originally, and he lived out the rest of his days there.
Uh, you know, when we were there, I think that was one of the first times I filmed with my GoPro, and I got separated from everybody, and so I was walking around by myself on the top cell block there, and brand new charged light, that slips on the top of the GoPro,
Mm-hmm.
and I walked in one of the cells that they like the first one on the block as I was going to walk across the cell blocks. And it was one that they were kind of using for storage. They had a couple brooms in there and a desk, a chair, or whatever. So I just wanted to pop in inside the cell and film it. When I walked in, my light would shut off, and then I would turn it on and it would shut off. And it happened like 3 times before I just got the heck out of there, and then it worked fine.
It's a dingy and dank and weird place to be. Like, don't you kind of feel like, like
Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like you're living in a sewer when you're just walking through there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, and I think people go and stay the night there, you know,
Yeah, I'm
I
not
think,
doing that.
I think they do. I think people do that, but just walking through there by myself, I couldn't walk really fast. I mean, I wasn't like running through there, but I wasn't, trying to, uh, stay there all night, but I did end up, I couldn't find my way out, and I went out one of the doors, and I was locked in outside. I had to walk all the way around the building, and then the gate was locked to get out. I had to climb through between the gate and the wall. I had to escape.
Look, like Ghost, that doesn't bother me, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to get into are they real? Do they exist? Whatever. But
Right.
they don't. I'm going to say this. It's not that they don't bother me because I think that they don't exist. I don't know why they don't bother me. Like they do bother a lot of people, but something more along the lines of like cryptozoology would really kind of skeeve me out.
Yeah.
But I did have I do believe that I had, I don't know if I would call it an encounter, but I do believe that when I was at the Mansfield Reformatory that I did have an experience. And so I too was with a group. I don't know, there were like 8 or 10 of us or whatever. But you know how like those tours, the one we went on, it wasn't guided, and you kind of get separated as you go because it's big, it's expansive. And
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
and
Unreal how big it is.
and
It's
part of
unreal.
me got a little bored, and it's a little like it's this weird like heavy damp feeling throughout the whole
Yeah.
structure that like
Right.
kind of just like heavy on the lungs, heavy on the breathing, just kind of wanted me to like hurry my way through the tour a little bit. And so I got to this portion, and you know what, and on your YouTube page, I saw that you had a picture of the chapel.
Yeah,
And
that place intrigued me. I filmed, and it actually really beautiful footage in there. Yeah.
your picture was very beautiful, but because it's not a guided tour that I went on, I don't recall seeing that. So maybe I skipped over
Oh,
that part somehow.
yeah. Well, see, now Hope, who's in the chat, she took us. And like I said, she's an expert. She's been there. I could easily see how you would miss it. I forget. I think it was like I said, you walked out of that chapel into the top of the cell blocks. So I think it would be easy. She took us up there. I don't think I'd have found it. Yeah, she took us up there, but I'm
So
glad she did. Yeah,
I'm
it was beautiful.
I made
Yeah,
my way to this one location where they had almost like three hallways of these little cells that face each other all
yeah.
along, right? So there's this like main corridor, and then it spills off into this little U shape that has these little cells, right? And
Hmm.
on the end of one of the hallways up here, off of that, not near the main corridor, but there was a window to the outside, just like a bar window, right? No glass or anything like that. So, but light shining in. And so I walked down. There was nobody with me. I kind of separated from the group. I walked down and I'm heading up here, and then I'm getting ready to turn right. And I turn right, and then I got to turn right again to get back to where I was from. And because I kind of want to see everything. But the cells were small, so I didn't really look at them too much, and I just made my way up, made a right, and then made another right. And as I was turning to make another right, I happened to see out of the corner of my eye some shadows of like two people. It looked like two people that were walking. And I thought, well, that's just, people in my group or other people that are there taking the tour. And so
Right.
when I got to kind of a stopping point, I stood there and waited for the people that I thought were in my group to catch up to me. Nobody ever
And,
caught up to me and nobody ever appeared. And then I walked back up to look and I'm like, oh, well, they probably stopped. They probably stopped to check something out. I walked back up and looked down that little corridor. There was nobody there. And I was like,
wow.
you know what? It's spooked me just enough that I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to that main corridor right now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Let me
need,
get out of here.
yeah, I don't need to
That's a,
investigate too much.
I know right where you were. I was walking around.
Are you talking about the
couldn't,
same spot?
yeah. And I was walking and walking, and then it would make a turn. I figure, oh, I'm going the right way. And then there'd be more cells and more cells. And, so finally I went out the door. I thought I'll have a better chance finding my car or the lobby, if I go outside, but that was not the case. But
Did
that
you
place is huge. Yeah.
Did well, and yeah, and dank as hell. And then part of the ceiling fell down in one of the spaces that we were walking through. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty dangerous. Did you see the holes that they used to put the prisoners in, like when they would act up, the tiny little holes in the floor?
I don't think noticed those.
They
Yeah.
look like little sewer caps, right? Like a man cover,
Right.
manhole cover, and then they say 30 days in the hole or whatever, and nowadays we got the padded cell, the segregation they put you away in. These were like putting a man in a little capsule in the ground.
Oh, that's unbelievable. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
I
and I
mean,
mean, I don't know. I don't want to sit here and be like, oh well, we need you need to treat prisoners really great because they probably did something shitty to get there.
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure
But
they
there's
deserved
probably
it.
some innocent people that ended up there as well. And so, I mean, God, I'm like, I'm a law-abiding citizen, but touring that place, I'm going, yeah, I really don't want to get even a speeding ticket at this point.
No, no, but yeah, if you read the Wikipedia or anything about that place, there's been I mean, just so much. I think there was a fire at one point where everybody was trapped in there, and all led to their demise. And so you can, if if that sort of thing happens where there's lost souls wandering around, that would be a place where it would
Mhm,
happen. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah. There's no doubt about it. But Yeah, interesting place for sure. I'd like to go back and
It's
finish the
not it's not expensive to tour there, and
right.
I recommend people go. I wouldn't laugh at anybody that decides to put on a hard hat going through there either, because like I said, part of the ceiling fell down
Yeah,
near where we
right.
were walking.
Yeah, you're in a I don't know how many year Hope knows probably how many years old that place is, but yeah, it's
Well, it's super old and they're not doing anything to maintain it. That's
right.
just, and like you said, people stay the night. I think you can do overnight Halloween tours and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Uh
know what? Ghosts don't bother me, but some of the haunted house, the haunted houses put on by people do bother me.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I never was a fan. I was always cool until the guy with the chainsaw chased you around, you know. I was
Right.
never
I'm
into
like,
that.
one of these days that asshole's gonna forget to take the chain off and
Yeah.
accidentally get somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
We There was a situation many years ago, and I think they did like some kind of hospital theme in downtown Columbus, and the people were, I shouldn't say people, it was probably just some men, were grabbing and groping people like
Oh,
as they were
yeah.
walking through, and that put me off. After that happened, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to any more of these haunted houses.
Yeah, and that's a perfect place for a, you know, maniac to act out, you know, because you could blend right in, getting out, you know. So, yeah, I don't know. They're fun. I used to work at one when I was a kid and it didn't bother me at all, but I just, you know, as you get older, I guess you know.
Well, and I loved them when I was a kid though too, but then like, you get older, you become more aware of some of the things out there, and to kind of circle this back to true crime a little bit, you have the Aurora movie theater shooting that
Right.
takes place
Yeah.
at the Batman movie. And
Yeah.
look, I'm a huge Batman fan, and in a weird way, Batman, the Detective Comics as a little boy got me into true crime. And so anytime any kind of Batman movie comes out, I'm usually the first in line to go. And I don't remember why I wasn't able to go there that the first weekend when that debuted, but that movie and then that shooting takes place. It was so off-putting to me that I don't think I saw that Batman movie for about 2 years. Never went to the theater to see it, and I was just like, it just put a horrible taste in my mouth, and I don't know why. I just, like, felt that I don't know. It had nothing to do with the movie either, but the compounding factor in there was that because you know that you're gonna watch an action-packed, violent movie, some
Right.
of those people didn't react because they thought it was part of the show. And you talk about these haunted houses. If we unfortunately we live in a world where we have active shooter situations rather frequently. If there were to be a horrible design for somebody to carry out something like that, these haunted houses, my God, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, around here, I can remember a couple years ago, a friend of mine, worked at one or volunteered or whatever he did, and they did have an incident, you know. I don't I I didn't keep up with it to see if people were harmed or what, but it does, I mean, it sucks that that's what that's what we're talking about going to the movies, you know. We should be just talking about how expensive it is, you know, not 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 running out the back door, you know,
or why
or
the
jumping
sodas
down.
taste different.
Yeah. No, they did not enough butter on the popcorn, but
Right,
that's not the
right.
things, and then that coupled with the fact that they're not putting out a lot of great movies anymore, yeah, it's a shame that that's the thing that we have to think about. I'm glad I grew up at a time where you would open, you know, the whatever the Scene magazine here was where all the events went for the week, you know, and you would open up to the movie page and it was full of movies you couldn't even decide which one to go to, you know,
Yep. Oh yeah,
and it's
I loved that Friday night.
yeah,
That was my thing. Usually, typically, I was also a guy that chased a lot of concerts and a lot of local bands, but usually I found myself doing that on Saturday nights. Friday nights for me was get my paycheck and whatever movie had just came out that I have to see. I'm going to be there for the 7 o'clock showing.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Mike wants to ask, Dave, can you ask if they plan on covering the Gilgo Beach Craigslist killer?
Yeah, so we actually, that's weird because we did cover that. I think it was like episode 6 or 7. It's one that we've returned to a handful of times, and we've done almost 700 episodes so far. Um, and now that they've made an arrest with Rex Howerman, I have a hard time saying his last name. He's got a lot of vowels in that last name, which makes things weird. But we did do, I don't know if it was on our main feed, because we have two shows. We do True Crime Garage, and then we do True Crime Garage Off the Record, which is a subscription show available on Patreon and Apple Podcast subscription. But we went through a lot of the evidence on that show very recently that led to the arrest, and it was really intriguing what they did with that investigation. And you hear so much on the news and on True Crime Podcast how much DNA is solving these old cold cases these days. But also, what's so great is the more recent crimes, cell phones are solving more of those crimes than DNA is. So we live in a very fantastic time where police and detectives have a little more in their tool belt and their Batman utility belt than they used to have.
Right. Mike says that's awesome. So that was you actually know the episode number, so to that, so Mike can go find it.
Yeah, like I said, I can't remember, David, if that was
okay.
If it
All
was
right.
on our subscription show or if it was on our main feed. But
I got you. Okay, so it might be in Patreon. Gotcha. All right. I don't Lake Ferry. Hello. Red Scout. Hello. And Bushcraft. I don't know if I said hello, but hello. So this is the one I was. This just came across my Twitter feed the other day, and then I had to read it, knowing that you were coming on. It was really long, and I won't fill up the whole show with this, but I'll just do the Cliff Notes version. But it was, and I wanted to know if you had done it, which we talked about, and you hadn't. But I wanted to present it to you because it is kind of a cool show idea that you could use. But it was in a New Yorker, and it was Stefan Borgo was the guy that the article was about, and the headline was "The Unveiling of an Expert on Serial Killers." So this guy claimed, and he wrote books over the years, many books, and he claimed that he interviewed over 70 serial killers.
okay.
Well, and it details all through the years. Well, somebody that was into true crime was noticing some holes in his story. So they got together, and to make a long story short, they formed a Facebook group and worked it like a job, going through all his books, calling people in the books, finding people. And anyway, they came to the conclusion that the guy really only had interviewed at most 7 serial killers. But he had made this whole persona of interviewing all of them, and even Manson and all the big ones, and it just turned out not to be true.
Well, access to these types is very difficult just because of where they're housed, right, and how they keep them. But on top of that, a lot of these guys, they fancy themselves as something special, right? Like, oh, I'm granting rights to you to see me.
Yeah.
And that I'm special and everybody else is a nobody. And I mean, that's in part why they feel that they can kill with impunity, because they are different than you and I, that they are special and we are not. We're just numbers to them. And so here's the thing: if somebody wants to write a really cool true crime book where they interview a bunch of serial killers, if you are a lady, you have a much better chance at that than David, you and I would, because of their ego, they will talk to women where they won't talk to you and I. because
Right.
they're some of them are braggarts and they like to boast about their crimes and how smart they are, and they like to tell that to the fairer gender, because that's who they desire. And yeah, I actually did many years ago reach out to Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer out in California. I wrote him a really lengthy letter, and he responded in a way. uh, he toyed with me, basically, is what he did.
Oh, really?
So
So
what he did was he never actually replied to me personally. What he did was he handed off my letter and my information that I gave him to another convict and had that person contact me. And that interaction was rather interesting. But yeah, I thought maybe I could trade letters with Edmund Kemper, and that turned out not to be the case. He handed my letter off to another inmate that he knew, and that inmate bothered me for a while.
okay. So you were talking to another inmate.
Hmm.
They were just messing with you. Yeah. Wow.
Well, no, I mean the other inmate told me that he wasn't Edmund Kemper right
Oh,
away.
okay.
He made that very clear. We had a couple phone calls. We traded a couple of written letters back and forth, snail mail. But yeah, Edmund Kemper wasn't going to talk to me.
Not unless you're a lady, then he might marry you, huh? Then he would marry you from inside the jail.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, he certainly loved talking to the FBI. The FBI, that was one of the serial killers that they gained some of the most information from. He loved talking to the FBI. And I thought that maybe I could reel him in a little bit and entice him with the idea that maybe we could write letters back and forth and trade thoughts on the Zodiac killer,
Yeah.
because
Oh,
Zodiac
yeah.
killer's still unknown. Edmund Kemper would have been killing co-ed killer shortly after the Zodiac killings stopped. But
Y-
Edmund Kemper killed his grandparents as a teenager and was locked up for years for that. So I thought maybe given his IQ and how much he spoke to the FBI, like his IQ, this dude was off the charts. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you know John Douglas, the legendary FBI profiler, but I've talked to John Douglas a couple times. We've had him on the show, and in part the Silence of the Lambs, the Agent Crawford
Yeah.
is loosely based off of John Douglas, who is a real life person, and we've had him on True Crime Garage a couple of times. And John Douglas told me that that was the only, he actually interviewed dozens and dozens of serial killers, and that was his idea, that he and Robert Ressler came up with, that to learn about these guys, we should learn from the ones that we have already apprehended and that are already locked up.
Yeah.
And Douglas told me that that's the only time in his entire FBI career that he knew, walking into the room to interview a serial killer, that he was not the smartest guy in the room. The serial killer was Edmund Kemper.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty common occurrence that those guys are. I saw somebody that was linking the Unabomber with the Zodiac killer. They were saying what coincidences they had, but
We did some talk about that on True Crime Garage. Yeah.
I'll have you. Yeah. Where do you stand on that? You think? I mean, um,
I
and
don't
then
put it out of the realm of possibility. I
right,
don't put
because
it out of the realm of possibility. Both of them like to play games against authority, which is very interesting. And both of them had a fascination with San Francisco.
right.
So I'm not saying I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Ted Kaczynski was the Zodiac. I'm just saying that there are reasons to make that connection.
Yeah, the guy wrote a book. As a matter of fact, I heard him on Coast to Coast not too long ago, that had written a book and basically studies it. And and he was saying that at that time, I think the Unabomber just passed away. I think, didn't he?
Yeah, he died earlier this year, and
yeah,
I had a couple bourbons that night when he died, in a little bit of celebration. And I hate to be that way, right? Like we're told to turn the other, turn the other cheek and wish the
right,
best for in forgiveness, but some people you just can't forgive. I mean, the guy was
right,
he's mailing bombs to people. He killed
yeah.
people and maimed people, and
But again, I think he had a very arrogant, and he was one that, his sister-in-law knew who it was. It was him, his sister-in-law
yeah,
knew the whole time, right?
or
That
had a
sounds like your brother.
suspicion. Yeah, because
Yeah,
she
it
knew
sounds
he
like,
was a weirdo and had to convince her husband,
yeah.
hey, you might want to
Um,
look at your brother.
Montauk Estrange is asking thoughts on Jack the Ripper.
Wow. I mean, I can't even begin. Like, I do think that very likely Kosminski was the Ripper, and people that know the case know who I'm talking about. Kosminski. There's two different spellings for his name. I think if you go back to the
Is
oh
he the
wow
guy the doctor from Chicago?
no
No.
he became mentally ill around the time of the killings and was essentially homeless, and they locked him up, put him in a mental institution, and the killing stopped after that. I'm not saying that it is him, but if you had to gun to my head me pick somebody, I would pick Kosminski or Kaminsky. Again, there's two different spellings for his name. um that case, we've never covered it on True Crime Garage because we couldn't. We couldn't, and the reason why, like, I was so obsessed with that case for years that it would take like 30 or 40 episodes to get through everything that I've ever reviewed on the case. And I don't think that we could hold the listeners' attention for that many episodes. I mean,
Right.
you're talking about a case that is been unsolved for over 100 years, and depending on what website you go to, there might be upwards of 70 or 80 suspects in that case. There's a lot of really bad suspects that are not good suspects at all in that case, but that's a really long story. But man, if I didn't have bills to pay, right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I could just dive into something and do a passion project, I would do like a 45, 50 episode Jack the Ripper show.
Yeah, I'm noticing that all this working and all this stuff's getting in the way of making videos. You know, Hope said that she would listen for 40 episodes. So, and Montauk says thank you, and also asked about the international doctor. Well, I've again, like, putting two people together. I've heard theories about. I can't remember the documentary I have about that doctor in Chicago. You know who I'm talking about, right? That was around that same time period that visited England when that
Well,
was going on.
well, there's three or four suspects that have ties to the U.S. that ended up in the U.S. You might be talking about Francis Tumblety. Is it Francis Tumblety that you're talking about? But I don't think if that's who you're talking about, I don't think he made for a very good suspect. I think he was homosexual, and I think that there is a very predominant heterosexual aspect to these killings.
Oh, okay. Oh, I got you. Well, and then like you said, it would take 40 episodes. So we'll look for those up and coming episodes.
Yeah, yeah. If the captain ever fires me, that's my fallback plan.
If you get fired, well, then I don't know if I'll be happy about that. Then, Montauk, appreciate your answer. There we go. All right.
I love the question, by the way, Montauk.
Yeah, that was a great question. T Bowie, I don't know if I said hi, but hello. Thanks, Mike. Have we talked about your book? I think we did talk about your book. Should we show them one more time? Again, I was telling you backstage that last week I didn't even get halfway through my notes because the conversation was so good. And it's the same case with you, which I knew it would be.
So this is a case that, if people are not familiar, Delphi murders. The reason why it's called the Delphi murders is it's a double homicide that took place in Delphi, Indiana, and it's a very horrific crime. And typically, it's kind of human nature to call these things something other than what they are. Call them based off the location or something specific about the crime. It kind of softens the blow when you talk about these cases, because they are very heartbreaking. But the quest to find the man on the bridge, the Delphi murders, it's my true crime book. It's about the Libby and Abby murders that took place, and fortunately they've arrested a man and he's awaiting trial. And so he should be looking at facing trial January of next year. And I wrote a large portion of the book in real time. It was an investigation that took 5.5 years to lead to an arrest. And so it was a case that I became obsessed with and journaled about. And we covered it on True Crime Garage in multiple episodes. And I had to write the book to, in part because I became so obsessed with it that it was a way for me to kind of walk away from the case. Like I kind of had to check out from it after a while, David.
Right. Yeah. So so I was asking you backstage if it was available on your website, and you said you do occasionally sell signed copies there, but it's available on Amazon.
Yeah. You can get it hardback, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And so we do the podcast, and people were really surprised when the audiobook came out that it wasn't my voice. I don't do the narration for the audiobook, and it didn't make sense to people. And to be honest with you, I just thought when I signed with the publisher that it was kind of understood that I would do the audio part. And so we're sitting in a meeting, and they go, good news, we found someone to narrate the book. And I sat there for a second going, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I thought it was understood I'm doing the narration for the book. And I was getting ready to chime in, and then somebody goes, we got Kevin Pierce to do it. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Pierce.
Oh, well, there you go. Right.
And so immediately I just shut up, and I was like, oh, great. Well done.
So Montauk's going to be picking up a copy. Yeah, me too. That's what I was telling Nick backstage. All the guests, there's so many people with books that I got to buy now because they've sold them. They sold me on. I liked them personally, and now I got to own the book.
You're going to be busy reading.
I'm going to be busy reading. I'm already busy reading. Yeah. So that's awesome. So you can get that on all the different places, and occasionally on his site, but do check out truecrimegarage.com because they have awesome merch too. Just hit on that real quick. I noticed that one thing that made me laugh was that you have douche canoe. Is this something they say? Douche canoe shirts and hoodies. Is that something you say a lot? Douche canoe. Don't be a douche canoe.
It used to be something that we would say a lot. When we have suspects in a case, when we have people that we know are guilty in a case, people that are just bad people, we have no problem calling them every name under the sun. And one of the names that people loved, the listeners loved, was Douche Canoe. So
Douche Canoe.
We have to do some Douche Canoe shirts. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys want a Douche Canoe shirt, it's
not
douche canoe.
Not safe for work. It's not safe for work. Don't wear that.
Don't use it. That's not at work. All right. It's a long. Mike says it's a Long Island term. Okay. Well, it's manifested its way here to Ohio. So
That it
there you
has.
have it. There you have it. All right. So we're at an hour, Nick. I can't thank you enough for being here today. You'll have to come back.
It went
Um,
fast. We'll have to
it,
do it
it,
again.
I knew it would go fast. I didn't get halfway through my notes, but I really enjoyed talking to you on the show and backstage. Is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap it up?
Well, I'll say this. I thank you for having me on, David, and you're exactly right. Let's do this again. We'll have another go around, have another fun time. Thanks to your listeners and your viewers for putting up with me for the last hour, and it's been a lot of fun. And I appreciated the questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was awesome. Oh, I didn't even get to the viewer question, which is there any
Yeah, do a viewer question
case?
if we got time.
The one I got emailed was the question was are there any of these true crime stories that keep you up at night?
A lot. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, and again, that's. I mean, I'm not trying to just sell the book, but that is why I wrote this book. I was obsessed with this case for 5 years, and when I started writing the book, they didn't know who committed these crimes, and this was my only way of like I had to be done with it. I had to be done with it because it was messing with me. And I'll tell you what, I will read the first page of this book real quick
Yeah,
to you.
go for it. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So it says portions of this book were written in real time before the arrest of Richard Allen. This murder investigation was nearly 6 years active before charges were filed. Here in these pages, you will find the timeline, the facts, and one man's thoughts, observations, and obsessions with an American murder investigation. This tragedy was never far from my heart. This was my way of walking away from this case. And very sadly, that's something that I had the opportunity to do. The people that loved these victims and knew these victims can never walk away from this case.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so, I wish them the very best. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases that keep me up at night. And if there weren't, then what kind of person am I? Right.
Right. Right. Exactly. But yeah, that was in the questions there, that your approach of honoring who is lost and kind of telling their side on the podcast is pretty honorable. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
We try. We try. It's difficult. It's difficult to do, but yeah, that cannot get lost in the sauce. If it does, you're not doing it right. I mean,
Right.
that's who
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's who these stories are about. And the other thing too, like, all right, I've had a few whiskeys, so you're
I love it.
getting
I
really
love it.
undercover here.
I know. I have. Yeah. I haven't seen how
what,
I snuck you some whiskey and I'm asking you tricky questions. Yeah.
one
See
thing
how I do it.
one thing I talk about in the book, David, is that unfortunately the people that we tell these stories about, these true crime stories, a large part of the story is about the crime, the investigation, and the possible perpetrator, or finding out who the perpetrator is, and then their story. And then these people who were the victims, that's the smallest part of their life. They were only a victim for a few minutes of their entire life.
That's a great point.
And it drives me crazy. So yeah. They were only a victim for a tiny little portion of their lives, and there's so much more to them than that, and so much more in their social circle and their families and all of that. So,
it kind of gets skipped over in the story, doesn't it? Sometimes, largely.
Yeah, and I'm not going to pretend that we don't spotlight their lives as much because we try to really hone in on the investigation, but I do hope in some small way that True Crime Garage keeps their story going and keeps the spotlight on the investigation and reminds people that this is something that happened and this is something that hopefully one day will be solved and there will be justice in some form for these people.
Right. Good thoughts. Hello, Elena. Mike Jones. It's True Crime Garage. It's not. Do you have a? It's not True Crime Garage TV. I don't think it's just True Crime Garage on YouTube.
It's both actually on YouTube.
Oh, he has both. Okay, well then that was a good question, Mike Jones. And then also truecrimegarage.com. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think all your I saw episodes there and listened to some. Are all your episodes on the website?
No, we have a good majority of them, but again, we have close to 700 episodes. So,
okay,
if you want the full catalog, I believe you can get about 630 of them are on our main feed for free. We do have the first 50 behind a paywall, which is subscription shows on Patreon and Apple Podcast subscription. But yeah, we have a ton of free stuff between YouTube and our main feed of True Crime Garage.
Awesome. Lake Fury has a great question. I'll read it, but that would probably be, it's a great question, but it probably would be a whole hour at least. What makes these serial killers tick on a psychological level? That's what her daughter is schooling for. Okay. Into the minds of these people and get justice for the victims and families. Yeah, that would be what's in their minds would be hours, wouldn't it, Nick?
Right. Well, and even the experts don't fully understand it, but to put it in its most simplest of forms, most of these individuals have experienced some kind of abuse, physical, sexual, mental, emotional. Usually it's multiples of that, especially at a young age. And then on top of that, they tend to get violence and sex all wrapped up into one fantasy. And that's the simplest of forms for the serial killers, because the overwhelming majority of serial killers are performing sexually motivated homicides.
Wow. Yeah. Profile in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. That it is what it is. That's the seed. That's the seed right there.
Oh, yeah. There's so many. I'm going to say thanks to Nick. There's so many. I want to go a million different places, but we'll have to get together again, because that just brought up another thing that we could go for hours. But I want to thank you very much, Nick, for being here. You are an awesome guest, as I knew you would. If you ever need anything, let me know. I'm going to roll the outro and thank everybody for being here. If I hit the right button, and we can't talk on the way out. I have some scrolling going on. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Awkward silence here at the end.
No, thank you, David, for having me on, and thanks to everybody for listening to me and putting up with me. And check out the book or check out the podcast.
There it's kind of going. So it's truecrimegarage.com.
Truecrimegarage.com. Yep.
And at True Crime on YouTube, at True Crime Garage on YouTube. Oh, and what's the captain's? The captain's got a YouTube channel.
If you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'm at TCGNIC.